So this is the moment I'm sure everyone's been waiting for, but it's my great pleasure to introduce Nicolás Arqueros, who is the CTO of EMURGO. I'm not sure where he is. He's right here. And Charles Hoskinson, who's the CEO of IOHK.
I have met you already 5 or 6 times, and every time I'm really excited to talk to you because every time there is so much going on in the space. And now we have you here in New York. How to start? Can you tell us how's your day? Has been really busy as usual?
I'm tired. It's been a long 23 days. I started from Colorado to Hong Kong, then Hong Kong to Australia. Then I went from Australia back to Hong Kong. And then I went Hong Kong to Athens, Greece. Then I went down to Ethiopia. Then from Ethiopia to Toronto. It took 27 hours to get to Toronto. That was hard. And then I came here. So I'm really tired. But anyway, thank you all for coming on such short notice. Yeah, that was in 23 days. Yeah, so
Wow.
yeah, I know, right? I'm getting old and fat. That's the problem. But thank you all for coming. This is an amazing turnout, actually. When I first started doing this, 2 people would sign up and 1 person wouldn't show up. So I'd have a conversation with myself. So it seems that things have changed a little bit over the years.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you if you could raise your hands if you are from New York. And now let's see if there are people outside New York. Can you raise your hand? Where are you coming from? Nice. Let's see if we get someone that's a little farther away. Where are you coming from?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Wow.
Now that's a hold.
Yeah. That beats New Jersey.
You get some Russians here as well?
Yeah, you're from Russia.
Yeah. I think you're from Siberia, apparently.
Yeah.
Wow, that would have been my guess. And
We got someone from Japan. That's Fred Tanaka. South Africa. We're at? Cape Town. That's the pretty city. I was just in Johannesburg. I was in Sandton. It was nice. I was with the Ramaphosas. They took care of me.
okay, guys, so how are we going to do this? I know that you have a zillion questions to Charles, so I'm going to be not too greedy, so I'm going to share my time also with you. So the idea is that half of the time I'm going to be asking Charles some questions, and the other time is going to be a Q&A for you guys. So you are going to get the chance to ask whatever you want to Charles. So Charles, to start, I wanted to start from the start. What is Cardano? What is the vision? And if it's have changed a little bit, I guess that some people have already watched the whiteboard video that's over 300,000 views by now, or even more. And if some of that vision has changed, and if you could tell us about that.
Yeah. It's all a scam. Go home. No, I kid. So Cardano is kind of like a DARPA project in a nutshell. We started in 2015 with this high-risk, high-return research agenda where we kind of looked into the future and said over the next 5 years, 10 years, what collections of fundamental technologies do we need to invest real scientific and engineering work into so that these systems have the ability to scale to millions to billions of users, they're interoperable with as many systems as possible, and also we have a way of managing them. You see, when you think about governance, you think about management, you think like Windows as a product. If it doesn't work, who do you go to? Microsoft. Your iPhone doesn't work, who do you go to? You go to Apple. If your government doesn't work, you go complain about your president or something like that, or your Congress. Well, what the hell do you do with an open source ecosystem? Like if Linux doesn't work, do you go hang Linus Torvalds? Do you go complain to the Linux Foundation? It gets a little murky. And the problem is that what if you start talking about your money, your government, your property rights, your identity, and all of these things are run by decentralized infrastructure. So we said, wow, this is a really cool thing to do. So why don't we go put a project together where we get the best scientists, we get the best universities. We have more than 10 now that we work with. We've written more than 40 papers. More than 20 have gone through peer review at major venues like Eurocrypt, CCS, and Crypto. And let's get really good engineers to write formal specifications and write some code in Rust and Haskell and Scala. And let's just see how far along we can get. So we wrote the Y Cardano paper. We brought a great team of people together. It started quite small. Now it's over 200 on the IOHK side in 16 countries. EMURGO is starting to kill it. You guys are doing a good job. And as a consequence, now we've gone from aspirational to actually solidifying on a coherent vision. We've discovered a lot of things along the way. For example, we discovered that proof of stake actually looks like a viable consensus algorithm. You know, there was a lot of people that done interesting things. It started with Sonny and his work on Purecoin back in 2011, all the way to NXT and to a bunch of concepts, but no one had actually done the job of formalizing proof of stake and saying, well, what does it even mean to be secure? What does it even mean to create a secure ledger? And what security properties do you care about? Which ones can you kind of throw away? Can it ever be egalitarian, or will it always be a plutocracy? You know, these are foundational questions. So we went and did research for 3.5 years on that, wrote a dozen papers or so, and we came up with a lot of interesting ideas. On the interoperability side, we said, boy, wouldn't it be great to finish what Blockstream started? You know, they got all this money just sitting in a pile, but they don't seem to be doing much on the sidechain side. So we said, let's go figure that out. So we created NEPA POWs, and now there's great competition there. A Fly client recently came out, and we have a whole slew of NEPA POW related papers coming out, which are basically proof of work sidechains. So it allows you to get certainty that the value and information you're seeing about another proof of work chain is correct without having the entire chain to validate it. And then we have an analogous construction on the proof of stake side called proof of stake side chains. So we've made some very considerable progress on the interoperability side of the spectrum. And then finally on the governance side, we've been really thinking deeply about concepts like liquid democracy and treasury systems. We wrote a very exhaustive analysis of the Dash treasury system. Out of Lancaster, we published a paper about how to use liquid democracy to run a treasury. It has a word salad of different crypto primitives like partially additive homomorphic encryption and things like that. So that's always fun and exciting. So it's been truly an amazing ride to see how far we've been able to push things. And now we're starting to converge to a production system. You know, we launched the first version of Cardano in September of 2017. We were on one exchange. Now we're on 25. We had nobody in the community. We have now over 100,000 people in the community. We've rewritten all the APIs. We've probably rewritten the software 6 times, much to your love and excitement and sadness and many of our partners. And we've learned a lot. We've also written a lot of formal specifications. We came up with probably the best way of doing UTXO. We have this beautiful random sampling for input selection. We have a formal spec for how to build wallets. We have a formal ledger specification for Cardano. We are almost done with a formal spec for Ouroboros. We have 2 implementations of it, one in Rust and one in Haskell. We have a litany of things we've done that are really interesting in the formal methods world, like we wrote an Isabel verification of one of our papers. We wrote a whole new process calculus. You know, so it's been a pretty interesting time because it's been like a synthesis of a lot of pragmatic, practical things, like just getting Rust crypto code to work in the browser through WebAssembly and a lot of JavaScript work, to like hardcore dependent types with Coq and Isabel and trying to actually prove mathematical theorems. And meanwhile, doing all of that while trying to get Bittrex' wallet unstuck or Binance's wallet unstuck. And gosh, it's been a lot of fun. So the vision in large, I think, is well underway. We have a lot of great tech to get us to scale, a lot of great tech to make us interoperable. And I think as we enter 2020, it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun tying everything off with governance.
Yep. And this is one of the things that I really like about Cardano. It has so many things that sometimes it could be difficult for someone that's just joining to understand all the capabilities of Cardano.
Yeah, like I did mention the PL stuff, like Plutus and Marlowe, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's like
a huge thing, right? We hired the guy who created Haskell, and anyway.
So I wanted to ask you if there is someone just joining maybe the crypto world. They have heard about some of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other ones, and we need to present Cardano to them. How would you describe Cardano in more like, in a simple way, more digestible for someone that maybe is not so technically savvy?
Yeah, the same way I brought up Ethereum when I was at Ethereum, and I said when Ethereum grows up, it wants to be a second-generation cryptocurrency. See, I'm kind of getting old and fat and worn down, and I've been in the space long enough to remember when no one took Bitcoin seriously. Like it was $1, and you know the hash rate would be very volatile, and you know you'd wake up some days and say, oh well, when's this party coming to an end? The point of Bitcoin was to basically be this crazy magic internet money that some anonymous hacker had created and see if people actually take it seriously enough to do real things with it, to trade products and services with it, to see if stable markets would form and actually be worth enough that people would even be willing to work for it, actually have a job and be paid in Bitcoin. And right around in 2013 is when we had the inflection point. That was when Bitcoin actually had its moment in the sun and people said, wow, this thing's real. It reached $1 billion capitalization. VCs entered, major entrepreneurs started taking it seriously, especially the really clever ones like Mark Andreessen and Wens Casares and so forth. And then we said, well, the problem with Bitcoin is it's blind, deaf, and dumb. Can't really do much with it. You can just push transactions to Alice to Bob. You can store value with it, but it's not useful. It's kind of like the old web browsers before JavaScript came. You had static pages, but you really didn't have Facebook or YouTube or any of these experiences because it was too difficult to build them or they'd have to be bespoke. So then Ethereum comes out and we said, well, when we grow up, we want to have this huge application ecosystem and stable currencies and ICOs and everybody can issue their own token and take care of refugees in Syria and yada, yada, yada. And guess what? It happened. And it's really amazing. But the problem with Ethereum is it's a victim of its own success. It's not really a good experience to get to millions to billions of users. So what people end up having to do is extract all their complex stuff and pull it off the chain and put it into off-chain sides of things. Like they say, I want to build decentralized Uber. And they try to do that, and they say, oh, it's 1,000 times more expensive and 1,000 times slower than it really needs to be. So let's do decentralized Uber, but I'll run it on my servers for now, and we'll have a smart contract somewhere along the way in the stack, and we'll connect it with some clever library.
I have heard that.
Yeah, exactly, right. So it doesn't really scale. It's not interoperable. It's not sustainable. Every time we have a governance crisis, we seem to end up with a cache or an SV or a private or a classic somewhere in the end of the rainbow, and it's not really clear how you pay for things. Like what happens when I come up with this newfangled super duper idea, like quantum resistance or a privacy primitive? Well, who pays for that? How do you fund that? Is there going to be some committee? Is there going to be some government-sponsored board? Are we just going to go tax somebody? No, you need to actually use the power of the printing press wisely. So the point of Cardano, explaining to a new person, is it's just a continuation of the movement that was started 10 years ago. It's not something radically new, like we've just woken up and said, oh, well, we're going to reinvent all of society in the world. We've been drinking that Kool-Aid since the 70s when the internet was started. That's what really changed everything, guys. When I was a kid, I used to ride my bicycle to the library in the rain, and I'd go check out books and drive them home, covering them in the rain. It took time, effort, money, and agony to move information. And this damn internet comes out, and suddenly you can just move information anywhere instantaneously for free. So somehow people are starting to wake up that if information moves this way, value ought to. And governance ought to, and decisions about property and all aspects of our lives ought to. So we've been for the last 40 plus years as a society dealing with the consequences of this. And Bitcoin is just a natural evolution, as is Ethereum, and as are third generation cryptocurrencies. There's plenty of people that when they grow up, they aspire to be one. You have the EOSs and the Tezoses and the Ripples and the Stellars, and they all focus on different things. Some people are more about interoperability, and some people are obsessed with TPS, and some people are really getting into the nuts and bolts of governance. And all we're trying to do is say, let's try to do this project in a very balanced way from first principles, and let's try to involve as many people as possible. Not just one cohort or live in Silicon Valley, but let's have the universities, let's have governments, let's go ahead and build a really fertile area in Africa and Addis Ababa and Ethiopia and Uganda and South Africa, and really work hard at trying to not only find a way to get people to care from different walks of life, but find a way to make this useful for some of the poorest people in the world. So that's what Cardano's like in a nutshell.
And you touch a specific concept that I wanted to ask you next. So this is great. And Cardano needs to do so many things, and we are starting to move faster and faster, if you guys have noticed. And for example...
Yeah, we got Ledger support, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Clap for him.
And also we heard news about this academy program that just finished in Ethiopia. Why Ethiopia? Why is academy important in Africa? Is this like random place, or there is something that is part of the vision of Cardano?
If you're going to change the world and you want things to work, go play in the harshest possible environment. Like anybody can grow flowers in Hawaii. It's really easy. It's a beautiful place. I grew up on Maui, and everything grows there. You cannot kill plants there. It's impossible. Then go try to grow orchids in Arizona or something like that, right? It's a lot harder. So when you don't have fertile grounds, when you have hostile environments, there you have to really work hard. And you look at Ethiopia, and there is very few places in the world that have the greatest long-term potential as a country like that. But right now, it's just a damn pain to do things. But 70% of the population is under the age of 30 or at the age of 30. That's 106 million people in the country. So if you're saying, who are you going to sell cryptocurrencies to? Who are you going to convince for cryptocurrency adoption? 50-year-old people? 60-year-olds, people just in love with the legacy system? Or young kids who grow up in a country with capital controls who really don't like their sovereign money and are internet savvy? So the demographics are there. And there's rapid deregulation happening, and there's a huge amount of foreign money. There's over $1 trillion that China has put into the continent of Africa. America's following suit. There's a lot of good stuff going on in that marketplace. And you're talking about a society that is currently 85% agricultural with a strong desire to move to an information economy. And they have no legacy loyalties. There's no JP Morgan Chase branch outside that you can look to and say, oh, yeah, there you go. There's no IBM running around or Microsoft running around that's competing with you. It's virgin territory. So we look at things in the long term and we say, what can we do today? What seeds can we plant today that give us the ability to actually enter that marketplace over a period of time, 3 to 7 years, that after we're done, we've actually going to grow something valuable. And we do that in 3 phases. So the first step is we just show up and we say, hey, give us your best and brightest, and we'll train them. Give us your college students, give us your PhD students, whatever, and I'll give my best and brightest. I'll send my professors out. People work for me like Lars Muñoz and Polina and even Phil Wadler, a legendary professor, 25,000 citations, H-index over 75, created the Haskell programming language. And they're going to go to your country, live in your country, drink the water, eat the food, stay at not the best of hotels, and walk the streets at night. And they'll be there just like everybody else. And give me your best and brightest, we'll train them. And if they're good, we'll hire them. And then we go to phase 2, where we say, let's talk about how we're going to solve real problems. So, for example, we met with the ATA, the Agricultural Transformation Agency. Wonderful organization. It was created in 2011 by a guy named Khalid Bamba. He was put into power by Bill Gates. When you're Bill Gates, you can do this. It's pretty cool. He called up Ethiopia's prime minister, and he said, you guys really need to create a new agency to worry about the smallholder farmers. So I'll fund it, you create it, and can we do it tomorrow? And they said yes, because he's Bill Gates, right? So he opened his wallet, put a bunch of money in, and got some other people behind it. And the mandate was to take care of the 15 million smallholder farmers. So those are people who live on less than a hectare of land, and basically find a way to get them grouped together, get them standardized, get them on the right fertilizer, get them with the right practices, and finally build some wealth up. So this guy, he's like a missionary. For 8 years, he's been working on this job. And it's unbelievable, the amount of depth and progress he's made. He mapped the entire country out with satellites for a system called EthioSys. He found out that they're only using 2 types of fertilizer when they should be using more than a dozen types of fertilizer. He found out that the seeds they're using and the planting practices they're using are just no good. 90% of the biodiversity of the country has been wrecked over the last century. It's because the population grew from 10 million people to 106 million people. And just amazing, the data and statistics they've collected. The apiculture business, so the honey business, 76% of the honey made by that country is in some way adulterated or contaminated, because they use most of it actually to make wine, and they don't actually export it. In a lot of cases, they throw away the beeswax, one of the most valuable parts of the process. So just every industry you look at, every part of that country you look at, these are the kinds of things. So we meet with them, and we say, I just trained 23 girls, 19 in Ethiopia, 4 in Uganda, out of a pool of 300 candidates. They're hard workers. Some of them drove 2 hours a day on a bus just to get to school. The Ugandans, they left their families at home for 3 months. One of them left a 1.5-year daughter at home, and they did great. So I'd love to use these gals to do some pilots with you. And we talk about foundational things like supply chains, for example. He has a huge problem with fertilizer right now. Apparently, fertilizer grows legs and walks away. I didn't realize that was an issue, but it is. And so they sail it into Djibouti, and then they try to get it down to Ethiopia. And all along the way, they go from 50-pound bags to 45-pound bags to 44-pound bags. Go to one warehouse, you can't even find the bag. It's invisible, right? Amazing. Or they come in and it's 35 pounds of fertilizer, it's 15 pounds of sand. And so we said, boy, wouldn't it be great to put a blockchain solution onto that and just try to create some sort of a system where you track and trace this and find out at the very least where it's getting stolen. At the very least, where it's developing those legs or where it's getting adulterated, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a perfect cohort to do it because we have people live there, eat the food, drink the water, speak the language, and they understand the culture. Meanwhile, we can match them with great people in our organization. And over a 6-month to 2-year period, we can do pilots. And at the end of those pilots, we can figure out how do we commercialize this. That's phase 3. So I'll give you an example of how you commercialize. It's called PPP, a public-private partnership. There was, if you ever try to pay your bills in Ethiopia, the utility bills in Addis Ababa, it was a nightmare a few years ago. Okay, you try to pay your power bill, you call them up, and they give you a code or something. You call them back to pay. Different persons, the code doesn't work. A lot of cases you pay, and then your power still gets shut off. And you say, what the hell happened? They say, you forgot to pay your bribe. Okay, it take hours to days, and the wealthier people actually hire people just every part-time just to pay their bills. This is how bad it got. So a company came on and said, you know what? Screw it. We're going to unify everything together, the power bill, the water bill, yada, yada, yada. Put it all in one thing. We'll digitize it. We'll create kiosks all around the city. We charge you nothing, government, to put this in. Is it humanitarian? No, it's good business. Because every single time someone pays their bill, that company gets a little bit of money on the back end. Just a little bit, a small amount. And instead of taking hours to days to pay your bill and having to pay a bribe, you can pay your bill in a few minutes. That system comes in, for every dollar they put in, they got $5 out. It was that profitable for the company to put this in. And everybody's happy because there's no more corruption. There's no more middlemen stifting off the money, taking the money out. And you can now do something that was so painful quickly. So those PPPs change lives, and they're very profitable. They're very prominent if you can get them right. But you can only do that on the back of a successful pilot. And that's why it takes 3 to 7 years. You have to build substance in the jurisdiction. You have to educate people. You have to find the right people. You have to get the right connections. And then you have to be very diligent and systematic and know who are the good guys and the bad guys, the good actors, the bad actors. And then once you do those pilots, you got to get them to a point where you can either say, cut it loose, it's a failure, or this looks like it's promising. And then you got to scale it. You have to take it to millions of people all across Addis Ababa or all throughout the 4 major agricultural regions. Or if you're dealing with diaspora, in the northern parts of Ethiopia, it's a lot of work. And we do it there. We're going to do it in Uganda. We're going to do it in Rwanda. We're going to do it all throughout Africa. In fact, we're working with ICE right now. Cardano will have meetup groups in 25 countries by the end of the year. And 190 meetups we're planning on holding. And by the end of 2020, we will have meetup groups in all 52 countries of Africa, including Sudan and Somalia. It's a commitment. We'll get it done, but that gives us market access. And then we can replicate what we started in Ethiopia and keep rolling on through. And then instead of me having to send Lars and Polina, I can take the students who graduated and have them teach. So this is the key to success. This is the key to growth. And there's no easy answer for it. I can't tell you when moon. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years to decades. But frankly, this is the new world financial system. The old one we had took decades to centuries to build, depending upon when you want to start measuring from. And this one's going to take decades to centuries to build. That's why you have to build it right with principles, with peer review and formal methods. It's why you have to build it in a truly global way. It's why you have to be a bottom-up company that's highly decentralized. And it's why you have to figure out how to make it work without leaders. Because I'm not going to be around to get it done. I'll die at some point or get too old or too tired or maybe I just won't want to do it anymore. So there's got to be somebody else, and so you have to create the right system to carry it out.
This is amazing, and it's not something that you hear every time that blockchain companies like doing all these activities like somewhere outside like first world countries. So even like training people, like having a path for them and like a whole vision for that's like amazing. And it's like something different. And I wanted to ask you, are you guys just doing things that look different, or are you also different in some ways? IOHK is based in Silicon Valley, or could you tell me more about like the difference between like a normal company and like how IOHK does things? Is to be different, you actually need to be different?
We do not have an office in Silicon Valley, and I have my boots on. You see, I got my girls. I'm from Colorado. I grew up in Hawaii. I don't like Silicon Valley much, to be honest with you. You spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and I think they tend to focus on the wrong things. And the move fast and break thing mentality is counterproductive for our industry. Guys, this is not a race to see how many customers you can get. The mistakes I make, Dan makes, Vitalik makes, and other people make, society will live with for 50 years or 60 years. The mistakes made in TCP/IP by Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn back in the 70s, we all live with. The mistakes that Brendan made when he created JavaScript in way too short of a time period, developers are still living with. We've almost fixed them, but they're still there. So why would you like to take it up an order of magnitude and say, oh, by the way, the thing that's ultimately going to determine whether you get a loan or how your health records work or how you can send money to your family and friends, we should build that as quickly as possible, as sloppily as possible, because somebody wants a lot of users. It's crazy. And so any place that's a mecca for that, we just stay away from it. And we say, you know, go use EOS if you want that or something else. Have fun with that. But if you actually want to do something great, you need to take a step back and really think through, well, what does this mean? Look, the world is going digital whether we like it or not. We're going to big data. We're going to algorithms. And if you look at the trends, countries like China have systems like social credit. How many people have heard of that? Show of hands. A lot of people, more than it was last year. And what does it really mean? Well, it means everybody gets a number stamped on their forehead. You don't pay your train ticket, your number goes down. You know, you take care of your grandmother, maybe your number goes up. You buy some healthy food, your number goes up. You buy some pork rinds, your number goes down. Your number gets too low, your passport gets revoked. Your number gets too low, you get fired from your job. Your number gets too low, you can't ride a train anymore. That's dystopian if I've ever heard it. And what happens when AR comes in the next 5 to 10 years? That number is no longer private. It's flashing right on like a Black Mirror episode on your head. It's not science fiction. It's fact. It's in Shanghai. It's in Beijing. And by 2022, it'll be throughout all of China. This is a country that has concentration camps in Western China. They put 2 million Muslims in them. Okay, that's 1.2 billion people will live under this. And, you know, it's going to just keep scaling and spreading. We already kind of have some of these systems in the United States. You ever hear of the TSA watch list? Ever wonder why you get 4 S's on your ticket sometimes? We're a little bit better about it in the United States, but it still will come in some way or capacity. So these digital systems we build will inevitably be in total control of the money of your pocket and who you can do business with and why you can do business with them. And there's no law of physics that says these systems will be private and protect the consumer and are bottom up and are here and putting you in charge. Any more than there's any law of physics that says Facebook has to protect your privacy or Google has to not be evil. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. And if we do nothing, we choose to do nothing, the easiest path will be the path of least resistance and the one that the incumbents like the most, which likely will be the one where we're not in control. So there's a tremendous moral imperative to this technology that we build and the labors that we conduct, that not only is it built correctly, it's built with purpose, careful deliberation, decentralization, and a good philosophy behind it that protects people and that people can use to solve great problems without compromising their integrity or their principle. And so as an entrepreneur, I have the fortune to be in charge of a company where we can pursue that. It means we're a little slower. It means I can't ship features every week. It means sometimes we're not going to get it done before someone else gets it done. Took us a year for ledger support. Sorry about that. It'll be faster next time. But at the end of the day, at least I get to look at myself in the mirror and say, we're trying to do things the right way. And that's how we run the company. It's also why we recruit a lot from jurisdictions like Argentina and Greece and other places where maybe the government isn't working so well. And people really kind of get what we're doing. Like one of my favorite experiences last 5 years is when I went to Buenos Aires and we met this one guy. He was an older guy named Jose. He was missing some teeth and he's a little worn down. And he said, let me show you my house. And he takes me on over and he takes me into his yard very proudly. And he shows me this hole. And he said, that's where I hid the silver during the last monetary collapse. And the police came and they took it. And he said, let me show you something. He takes me to the backyard. And he said, that's where I hid the real silver. You know, like really clever guy, right? I would hope our children don't develop skills like that. But it's really fun to talk to these types of people and have these types of experiences and to say, hey, we're building the tech for them. And so that's who we are. That's how we recruit. And that's kind of the philosophy behind the company.
That's really interesting, and we have been talking about Cardano, its vision, how that vision reflects in actually like actions, as we heard from you in Africa. And also, to do things differently, you need to be differently, as you were explaining to us. And now Cardano is like doing a lot of, they need to get to a really big result. So we need to start taking like big steps. And the next one is decentralization and proof of stake. But a lot of people may be wondering, like, we hear that Bitcoin works pretty good with proof of work. Why do we need proof of stake? And do you guys have to do research why we have heard that other protocols already have proof of stake?
So proof of work's a great protocol. There's nothing wrong with it. And we still do research with proof of work, and we may even ship a proof of work product. It's just a philosophical difference between proof of work and proof of stake. So the problem with proof of work is this exogenous consensus. It's control outside of the system. So the economics of this system is if your ledger is successful, inevitably you will have a great degree of federation around a small group of actors because there's economy of scale in the mining game. Okay, this is not something that mom and pop can participate in. It's something that people have access to subsidized power and ASICs can participate in. And that's why the 10 largest mining operations in Bitcoin control more than 51% of the hash power. So if you can feed the people who run your system with 2 pizzas, you're not decentralized. It's a pretty good rule of the thumb. You need more than 2 pizzas. I don't know what the threshold should be, but it's certainly larger than 2. So if you're okay with mercenaries running your system who aren't necessarily terribly loyal to the chain, and you're okay with you not being able to participate in that game, not even at a small scale, then proof of work is pretty reasonable. Got a lot of great properties. The longest chain rule is wonderful. It means that you can bootstrap very easily. You don't need checkpoints. And, also there's all kinds of creative things you can do with ASIC resistant algorithms like Argon and balloon hashing and so forth. So it's intellectually very interesting, and there's cool things, and there's still lots of research in proof of work that's quite viable. Now, proof of stake, on the other hand, is saying, look, at the end of the day, what are we trying to accomplish with proof of work? We're burning a lot of energy to decide who's in charge to update the system. So if we can simulate that, then let's just get to the business of updating the system. Then we can focus all of our research on how can we update the system in a more sharded instead of replicated and distributed way so we can get higher performance. And that lottery thing that picks who's in control, let's start with something very simple, like maybe proportionate to your stake. And then if you want, you can come up with all kinds of other metrics that can either bias your chances of winning or diminish your chances of winning. Like if you are, providing lots of Oracle feeds, or you did lots of votes, or, you're sharing a lot of network resources. It doesn't even just have to be connected to your stake necessarily. You can come up with different decision mechanisms. The point of proof of stake is just saying, let's throw away all that expensive work and let's go ahead and focus on advancing the state of the network. Now, to give you an example of the logical extreme of this, we have an open source community member. His name's Marcus. He sends me an email and he says, hey, I'm thinking about trying to get Cardano to work on a Rock Pi board. We said, that sounds pretty cool. A Rock Pi runs at about 5-6 watts of power. And he managed to do it. And we're going to have a stake pool at the IOHK Summit next month in April 17th to 18th. And Marcus is going to do a workshop to show people how to build this with this $70 piece of open source hardware. And basically, the long and the short is you can run the entire Cardano network on 1,000 of these things, which is about 6 kilowatts of power. It's less than a reasonable sized home. Think about that.
That's pretty small.
A global scale network that's 30 times more throughput than Bitcoin, settles 12 times faster, 100 times more decentralized than Bitcoin on 6 kilowatts of power. And that's the starting point. And this is open hardware that anybody can buy. There's no patents associated with it. It's using an ARM device that's 6 cores, not a lot of memory. I think it's 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's where we're starting. So there's a humongous advantage when you pursue this technology, and this is pre-sharded. When we shard it, it gets even better. And then you can think about running lightning nodes or other types of layer 2 solutions on that. It really can get you to crazy performance levels. So proof of stake is just fundamentally different. It's saying we're okay with maybe coming up with a more deterministic, endogenous way of deciding who's going to win. And then let's get to the business of optimizing the system so that it performs at the lowest power cost, and also it allows people to participate at a much lower economic level. In fact, Marcus also got this RockPi board to work with a solar panel. And at some point, we'll put a satellite uplink to it, and we'll see if we can create a stake pool in Namibia or something like that, just for fun. Or Mongolia. I really love that place. So you really can't do that, though, with proof of work. You know, another issue is that let's say governments don't like this technology. What would you rather have, a system that has virtual control or a system that has physical control? If you have physical control, I can seize your warehouse. I can go and take your devices. Let's say 80% of your mining capacity is in the United States or China, and they outlaw that. Can these little things grow legs and run away? Not all of them. It's really hard to move a mining factory. It's like trying to move a large data center. Good luck with that. So it's just unrealistic to think you're going to be able to smuggle all those guys out. So what it means, you lost 80% of your hash power. Whereas if you're talking about stake pools and it's virtual control, it's very easy to redelegate to a different pool somewhere else offshore. You click a button, A to B, click. It's like sending a Bitcoin from China to the United States, click. That's another obvious benefit of these types of systems. Finally, you have this really nasty Goldfinger attack in proof of work systems that no one has come up with a super good way of resolving. So Goldfinger attack is where there's an incentive to destroy the currency for whatever reason. So let's say you have two proof of work chains, A and B, and they're roughly the same hash power and they share the same consensus algorithm. Well, if I control 51% of the mining power, it's very rational for me to go and destroy chain A, short sell it, and make a profit from burning it to the ground, and then switch all my hash power over to B. I make just as much money mining B, it's about the same price as A, and I've actually made a windfall profit wrecking your chain. And what happens? A recovers over time, and then I go back and destroy your chain again. How can you stop me? You say, well, just change the consensus algorithm. Okay, so you have to hard fork every single time you want to resolve an attacker? You know, so this is the issue, is that these mining pools are not loyal, they're mercenaries. They have no concern to the price of the currency. They have no concern to the needs of the currency. It's a service that they're providing. And just like when the Romans started hiring mercenaries and they got over-reliant on them, sometimes the mercenaries figure out they can make more money sacking Rome than working for Rome. And that's what the Visigoths did. So you have to be very careful with who's in control and what is the logical extreme in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years for where that leads. And I just don't like systems that have subsidized power and patented hardware and exogenous control, that it's not public to the network. And also that I always have to worry that some external actor will get more power, come in, destroy my system because they can make a cheap buck. And we've actually seen 51% attacks now in the space. That's my opinion. Some people disagree with me. And by the way, IOHK actually still does proof of work research. Like we're right now working on chainless mining. We have a new proof of work protocol we've been working on for a little while, and it's really cool stuff that's high throughput using DAGs. So there's a lot of stuff that's still going on, and you know, I think proof of work is viable. But where, in my view, it should go is proof of useful work. So instead of wasting electricity, let's just try to find something that's socially beneficial we can do with the selection algorithm, so that as a side effect of trying to find who's in charge, you actually have done something more than just burn energy. You know, Bram Cohen is searching for this with Chia, and he's doing proof of sequential work, and he's thinking real hard, can I create a decentralized file system? Primecoin tried to do this to find prime numbers. There was a paper out of Berkeley, ironically named Proof of Useful Work, which came up with some ideas there, but it's an underutilized and understudied part, and it's a direction I hope we go to.
This sounds great, and so it helps me to connect to the last question that I want to make before passing it to you guys, and how this is like the next big milestone for Cardano. How it's going to happen? If you could explain it, it's just as easy to like push an update to the Cardano network, turn a switch from off to on, and we are in proof of stake? Or how is this going to happen for someone that is excited about proof of stake and want to see it like live?
Yeah, it's a very complicated process, rolling out a fully decentralized proof of stake protocol. So how you do it is first you have to get the social and economic dynamics to a certain critical mass where the system is sufficiently valuable and there's been enough stake drift that your Gini coefficient looks good, that you feel that it's reasonably decentralized. So we launched it. It had a small market cap. Now we're much higher, like 1.7 billion. And there's been a lot of drift of money from the original people to other people. And it's now in a lot of marketplaces, and there's much more sophisticated people in the ecosystem than there were a year ago. So the social dynamics are right, so that if there was a way to decentralize, we would organically see people do that. We would see people hosting stake pools. So we recently updated Cardano to 1.5. This is Ouroboros BFT. And basically what's going to happen very shortly, like in a week to 2 weeks, hopefully sooner, is that we're going to launch the Shelly testnet. And this is the first time ever you're actually going to be able, on a command line interface, to register a stake pool and actually delegate the stake pool. So if some people want to run them. Every place I go, someone wants to. There'll be a way to do that. And then what happens is that we can kind of allow some saturation of stake pools, and then inevitably we can kind of upgrade the Cardano network to now begin a gradual decentralization process. So when that final hard fork comes, we'll say, okay, each epoch, so every 5 days, an increasingly larger percentage of the network will be, blocks will be produced by stake pools instead of the Ouroboros BFT protocol. And as long as chain quality looks good, meaning the stake pools are doing their job, then you keep advancing the protocol. So you keep going to more decentralization and more decentralization, eventually reach a certain threshold, and the whole network is made by the stake pools. Now let's say that for whatever reason they're not doing the job and the chain quality is terrible, they're not showing up, slots are malformed, or they're double spent, or there's some issue there, then it regresses back, or it stays the same level of decentralization. So it's a nice control mechanism where people can watch real time. It's almost like, anybody ever play World of Warcraft years ago? Yeah, a few people, okay. Remember there was some sort of, and I never played it myself. I was an EVE Online guy. But I remember reading that there was some sort of competition between Alliance and Horde, and there was the first one to get enough resources to open some sort of gate. And everybody in the game can kind of track that real time, right? Well, it's the same situation here. You can kind of see real time how many stake pools have registered, how much delegation has occurred, are the stake pools actually producing blocks or not? And then very shortly, like not years, but months, the network will eventually become totally decentralized in a very productive way. People have had time to establish brands. People have time to register their own private pools if they're larger holders. And there's a lot of best practices that have gotten around. A lot of the bugs, if there's some fatal flaw, it just means you've slowed the network down by 5%. You haven't destroyed the system, right? So there's a lot of safety wheels there. And then we exit the year basically with a beautiful consensus protocol, a huge community of stake pools, lots of internal learning, and basically something that's 100 times more decentralized than Bitcoin. Not to be outdone, Ouroboros Chronos is coming soon, which is the newest update to Ouroboros. And then followed by that will be Ouroboros Hydra, which is the sharding version. So right as we've almost finished decentralization, we'll begin the forks in the process to shard the system. And then adding layer 2, we should be able to get to an extremely high set of performance. In parallel, somewhere along the year, we're also going to roll in Goguen, which is the smart contract side of the system. And that's actually nearly done. We had Plutus Fest in December, and the extended UTX model is fully figured out. Plutus is basically nearly done. The Ethiopian girls actually broke Plutus a few times because the last month of the class was Plutus programming. They were the first people outside of the company to do that. And what was really humbling was that Phil Wadler, the guy who designed it, was there in Ethiopia, and he had these 23-year-old girls showing mistakes that he had made, and he was very humbled, and he had a great time. But those girls are really smart, man. They did a great job, and actually 4 or 5 of them are probably going to be full-time and doing nothing but Plutus and Marlow, basically writing smart contracts and trying to find ways to break the system. So it's a good way of testing by doing. So as we're decentralizing, the extended UTXO will be added in, Plutus will be added in, and we'll exit the year basically far more decentralized than anyone else in market, better performant, I'd say, than most in market, and basically with full scriptability. That's a pretty good year if we can get there.
Thank you, Charles. This has been like a great explanation of like what is it coming, and definitely it's not something as simple as like just push an update. And sometimes that's why things take a little more time, because you need to see so many repercussions that actually are not so straightforward to see. So now I would like to pass it to you guys with questions. And what I'm going to do too is that I'm going to swap between questions for you guys and also from questions from the Japanese community, Korean community, Chinese community, and Spanish community. Because I also wanted to integrate them because sometimes because of the language barrier, they don't get to ask Charles some questions. But let's start here.
And actually, we have Fred here, so he can translate Japanese as well. And you can translate Spanish. And can you guys translate Russian? Okay. All right, so ask in any language you want. We'll figure out a way to make it work.
Sounds good.
I'll go first. French community, okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I'd like to, can you help me understand
Yes.
By the way, Rob was one of the graduates of our Barbados Haskell class long ago.
I'm trying to understand the relationship between the value of the ADA coin and the adoption of the ecosystem. I guess my question is, when I think of the Ethiopian farmer, is it better for the Ethiopian farmer to have a low value on the ADA coin so that he can process his transactions, or is it better for him to have a higher value on the coin?
Yeah, I don't want the Ethiopian farmer to be in ADA or care about ADA. That's not how we get value out of that relationship. So there's a big debate in this space. Oh, do permission ledgers even need to exist? Should they exist, or should everything be on an open system like Ethereum? And so it's like the Fabric versus Ethereum debate. And you have some people run around and say, permission ledgers are just crazy and meaningless and they're stupid. So here's the thing. If I get sick in Ethiopia, how does the hospital there get my medical record? You have a hospital in Ethiopia that no one knows who they are, and my doctor in Colorado is probably not going to trust them very much. There's all kinds of things in life that require people who don't know or don't trust each other to coordinate on some common goal for my benefit as the consumer. If I'm sick, I really want that hospital to have my medical records because it might be pertinent to saving my life. I might not even be able to consent because I'll be unconscious. So these consortium chains are basically all about saying you have known actors. You have universities, you have hospitals, you have agricultural commissions. They're not being created and destroyed. They're static actors. They're known. And when they change very slowly and usually with a lot of telegraphing. So step one is saying let's model those types of actors and give them a permission blockchain. And we have an enterprise offering for that. It's written in Scala. Now, what have you done once you've deployed that to those farmers for that supply chain or that hospital or to that university for credential verification? You've inadvertently given people wallets and digital identities and all kinds of capabilities because they need public-private key pairs. They need some way of managing that. For example, supply chain, they need to sign data when they enter in, so you have to create a system for that. Now, once you've created that infrastructure, then the name of the game is linking that infrastructure to open infrastructure, like Cardano, like Ethereum, these types of systems. I'm a little biased. It'll probably be Cardano, and that's okay. You know, if Vitalik wants it, he can do his thing. And so then once you've linked these things together, then you can talk around what products and services do those people need to get the most out of open financial infrastructure. They're going to need stable coins. They're going to need microfinance applications. They're going to need microinsurance applications. They're going to need cash in and cash out points for remittances, these types of things. And those will likely not be the ADA token. Those will be other tokens issued in the system. Just like Ethereum is ERC20, Cardano's a multi-asset system as well. The point of Cardano is you need computational fuel to meter these things. Second, you need a control layer for the system of deciding who's in control and also deciding who gets to decide where to move this type of a system. So the more of that infrastructure that's built on it, the more valuable it will be for that underlying layer to possess some unit of account in that underlying layer. And the more usage that underlying system's going to have, the more transaction volume, the more smart contracts it's going to be running, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a demand-based synergistic increase of value for ADA as a consequence of having lots of people in the system. Just like having a lot of Ethereum applications is creating heavy demand for Ether and bringing the value of Ether up. It's the same situation for us. Now, the farmer doesn't care about that, nor should they, and we would be ultimately failing the system if that was the case. The farmer just cares, do I have something that's easy to use, permits intermittency of both power and internet, so you can do offline, off-chain transactions and these types of things, and that at the end of the day, I can now interface with a global market for things like price transparency, cooperative lending. Like, for example, the ATA created these things called ACCs, agricultural commercialization clusters, where instead of saying, let's deal with 15 million small farmers, let's group the farmers into clusters. And then once they're in clusters, we negotiate with the cooperative. I probably would not lend to a single farmer on a hectare of land. I would much rather lend to 1,000 farmers and have social guarantees that the farmers are going to cover each other's debts. So when you have that unit, you can connect that and now do lending with that. And that's the open financial layer. That's why we call Cardano kind of like a financial operating system, that financial system for people who don't have it. Gives us the ability to group people. It plays nice with enterprise blockchain solutions, especially once we deploy, because we have protocols to let them move state and value between them. And once they're there, we can now have other tokens that entrepreneurs, maybe some in this room, maybe some in Africa, create specifically to solve particular problems. And we have a litany of solutions. Like, for example, we have a partnership with a company called Tangem. And at the IOHK Summit, they're going to unveil these beautiful little cards. They cost about 30 cents to make. They look like a credit card. They have a little NFC chip in them that's trusted hardware. And you use it as basically a super low-cost ledger device for a hardware wallet. Well, that same device can actually be reprogrammed to attest data entering the chain as an identity card, or actually to do an offline, off-chain transaction. Because all you're doing is just moving private keys from one device to another and getting a proof of destruction that it's been destroyed on that device. So these are the types of things we do, and that's what's going to benefit the farmer. And then synergistically, it'll benefit the ADA ecosystem because it puts more demand on the underlying ledger, and more people are going to want to purchase that currency to have a say and control in that.
So as I told you guys, I'm going to now ask Charles one of the questions from another community, and this one is from the Chinese community. It's a tough one.
Whereabouts in China?
Okay, so as I told you guys, I'm going to ask now some questions from different communities, and the next one is from the Chinese community, and I think it's a tough one, so it's going to be interesting to hear what Charles has to say. So in China, where Alipay and WeChat QR payments are really popular, what are the pros and cons of ADA and other cryptocurrencies as a medium of payment?
That's a good question. So there's been tremendous financial innovation in China. I mean, this is a country that was mostly cash-based just a few decades ago with almost no exceptions. And now you can literally pay for everything with like WeChat and Alipay. And so it's really crazy, the amount of innovation. But here's the secret sauce in that story. While you can easily use these systems are blessed by, controlled by, and report to the Chinese government. And they will be wired into social credit. There will be an enormous demand in China over the next 5, 10, 20 years for alternative systems that don't exactly report to the Politburo. And so it's not just ADA that's competing there. It's Bitcoin, Zcash, and a lot of other standards because people want freedom. Money wants to be free. People want privacy. Maybe I don't want everybody to know which ATM I used or which taco I bought or, what do I want, red chili or green chili. Maybe I want some privacy in my life, for heaven's sakes. So the first level of the answer is just regardless of how wonderful these experiences are, at the end of the day, people are going to use alternative experiences because those experiences will never offer privacy. Second, we are seeing tremendous innovation at the cell phone level. And anybody have a Samsung S10 or planning to buy a Samsung S10? Yeah, well, I'm going to get one here in a bit. I have an S9 on me. I haven't had a chance to buy one because I've been on the road. Well, cryptocurrency wallet's there. And that's going to work with about 10 million people and devices. Over time, the next 3 to 5 years, every phone will also be a trusted hardware wallet. And that's going to be wired into Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, these types of pay NFC systems. So your phone is now your wallet. And that's going to be ubiquitous to the consumer, and there are going to be open APIs, and any cryptocurrency will be able to get on them. So ADA, like all these other currencies, will enter that domain, and we'll eventually have 1 billion devices floating around where we can have a reasonable user experience and tap to pay. So at that point, it's less meaningful about, well, what is the consumer experience, because it's all going to be uniform, whether you're paying in Bitcoin and ADA, these other things. And it's more going to be about, well, do you have decentralized market making and liquidity and value stability, and is this a good system to store value in? Is this a good system to transact value in? That's the differentiator that's going to happen there. Is ADA going to win that fight? Probably not, nor will Bitcoin or Ether, because they weren't designed for that. If you're going down that road, you're looking at Paxos coin or Tether or USDT, because they're built for that. That's the purpose of those systems. So rather, we're an infrastructure coin. That said, I think we will be one of the best platforms to issue these types of currencies on, because we'll support a lot of things. For example, this concept of contingent settlement, the concept of being able to embed metadata into transactions, these types of things, which you kind of would like to have in commercial transactions. So what is contingent settlement? This is a basic concept of, I send value to Bob, Alice sends value to Bob, but Bob doesn't get it until Bob agrees to something, like a contract. For example, I say, I am donating money under these terms and conditions, and this transaction doesn't settle until Bob countersigns those terms and conditions. That's a simple contingent settlement. You can have much more complicated ones like multi-sig or these big trade finance deals. You can get crazy with it. But these are the nuts and bolts of commerce, and you'd like to know that you can embed these things into the transaction. So the transaction's more than just the raw movement of value. The transaction's also telling the story about the raw movement of value in an immutable, time-stamped way. The problem with centralized payment systems is that while the ledger probably won't be manipulated, the fact that Alice moved money to Bob, they do have dominion over the metadata. And as a consequence, they can change that metadata when it's politically inconvenient to them. Just imagine a world where you go and withdraw $300 from an ATM, and you did that right next to a nice Italian restaurant because it's lunchtime and you were planning to take all your friends out, but then somebody changes the metadata and puts it right next to a brothel at 2 o'clock in the morning. Same type of transaction. You've withdrawn $300 from the ATM, but that's slightly different metadata. And what would be the implications to your marriage or your personal life if somebody did something like that? And how would you fight that if it's a centralized service? Think about that. The world is going to move in this direction. So it would be nice if you had some certainty that you can always prove the nature of the transaction in a non-reputable way. And that's where I think we can compete on the consumer level with the Alipays and these other services. It gives us a bit more control over what we want to tell, and the cryptographic certainty of the things we're telling is actually correct.
What can I say?
A lot of people are clapping about that ATM for some reason.
Okay, so back to you
got
guys.
him over there.
Questions? Oh, okay. Give me a second so I can move the mic.
It's been swallowed by that carpet. That rug really ties the room together.
I like the green sauce.
The green sauce?
Oh my
yeah,
God,
me
oh,
too.
Yeah.
But like everybody likes red sauce for some reason. I don't know what the hell's going on with these people.
In my research, I run past swirls and Hashgraph, by Lehman Bard. Is that something you think is viable for, not having miners on the nodes? And do you think that you could ever move to that? Could I know ever actually shift or other things that were forks of Bitcoin? And is that even possible?
I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things that are coming up, like Elixir and Hashgraph, and then you got Avalanche. That's another one. It's kind of this Ripley consensus that gradually percolates up, and you can reach a loose understanding of something, and you have a way of revoking double spends. One of the biggest issues with Hashgraph, and the reason why we haven't taken it too seriously or investigated the underlying technology at a great degree of depth, is my understanding is it's heavily patented. It's the same for Algorand. I'm actually friends with Sylvia Macaulay, and he's a brilliant scientist. He invented the zero knowledge proof. He has a Turing Award. I mean, it's like he's at MIT. You kind of won. If you have the Nobel Prize of Computer Science and you're a tenured professor at MIT, there's really nothing more to do. And it's a brilliant protocol, Algorand. And the Hashgraph seems to have some merit to it. But at the end of the day, even if it's the best thing in the world, someone owns that. How is that decentralized? I mean, and they can all say, oh, well, the foundation has it, and it's for defensive reasons, and blah, blah. I don't have any patents. I've written over 40 papers. I could be Craig Wright in terms of patents. I could have 500 of them if I wanted. I don't. It's a commitment to open source, goddammit. What I make, you can use. It's fair game. And yeah, because Satoshi did that for us. There was no damn patent at the end of that rainbow. Nor did we do it with Ethereum. Never once did we worry, oh, what if someone forks Ethereum? What's going to happen? Oh, no. How will we compete if we don't have a court somewhere to defend us? So I don't take that technology very seriously. And another thing is that we also take a look at the team composition. We took a look at the rollout, and we take a look at where the funding came from. We look at, are they pursuing peer review at conferences or not? More people are doing that, like Dfinity does that now. They, when I was at CCS, Rapid Chain was shown off, which is another great protocol I'd highly recommend you look at. And they wrote that with Visa Research. It's a sharded BFT protocol. Unit E is getting peer reviewed, and a lot of other people are pursuing that. So these are the criteria I generally look for. Is it open source? Does it have kind of an open interdisciplinary team? Is there a good go-to-market strategy, meaning that there's more than just scientists or just engineers? Are there VC guys? Are there good community management people? Is it a continuation of an existing code base where they're trying to actually prove a particular concept? Like Zuko's the master of that. He forked Bitcoin and said, let's put something new and innovative on top of that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just innovate where we need to innovate, which was on the privacy side. And over time, we can add more complexity, which they are doing. We co-authored a paper with them called Sonics. It's a new zero-knowledge proof. It's great. Had they had it, they wouldn't have to do the ceremony for Zcash. They came up with a brilliant private computation scheme called ZEXE. I highly recommend you read it. It's like 60 pages of moon math. So there's a lot of these things. And honestly, the differentiator is not whether the protocol works or not, or can it under some optimistic condition achieve scale. The differentiator is it's something that actually has a path to getting adopted, a path to getting worked into market and being implemented, being iterated, and proving that it's useful. It also depends on what are you actually trying to build. I look at protocols like Avalanche and potentially Hashgraph as really useful for IoT applications. This is because you're talking about lots of low-powered devices, millions of them, that have to kind of bubble up some sort of truthiness behind something. And it's okay if it's a little off. It's okay if it's not perfect, like temperature sensors. Does it really matter if it's 89.889 degrees or 89.8897 degrees? No, it doesn't for most applications. And would you really want to put a heavyweight, very precise BFT protocol or proof of stake protocol or proof of work protocol to get that draconian consensus on that? No. It doesn't make sense in that type of a system. So maybe it's better, especially for non-financial applications when you're talking about millions of sensors, to use something that can admit millions of things to converge to a rough answer on a solution that you then can use for a context. And those protocols are probably much more useful in those contexts. So we watch them, we're aware of them. If they become really sexy and useful, we can certainly build our own. We have experts at IOHK like Matthias Fitzi. He's a Swiss researcher who that's all they do. They study these types of things, and they can build one in about 3 to 6 months. It takes about that much time, usually as a derivative of prior art. And then you basically go through the peer review process, and at the end of the rainbow, you have something you can build. But I think as a general philosophical point, we in the space, we have to get beyond intellectual property. It holds us all down. It hurts us. I mean, there's no greater example of people waking up than Microsoft. This is a company that said that open source software is cancer. This was an exact statement that Steve Ballmer said and Bill Gates said. And now they open source .NET. And they're using Linux on Azure. I mean, come on, man. It's like that's an awakening right there. That's a come to Jesus moment. They say, hallelujah. So if Microsoft can see the value in moving away from patents and IP, I think we as an industry should also do that. And people need to recognize that this is about more than making ourselves rich.
Did that answer your question? Yes, definitely. It's a good one. Sorry, guys. I'm going to jump to one of the questions from the Japanese community. So Cardano has a really ambitious roadmap, and sometimes things take longer than expected because there's research that needs to be done, implementation, and that's software. Also, IOHK has a contract until 2020. Is there any chance that some things are left out from the roadmap? What it will happen?
Well, you have to come to the Miami Summit, IOHK Summit, April 17th, 18th, and listen to Cardano 2020, our roadmap. Steve Miller's playing, and CCR. Come on, I would be a very fortunate son if I didn't have that. Somebody got that right. I'm such a joker. So anyway, rocking me. So anyway, we're not going to get everything done. You never get anything done. It's aspirational. It's like Kalo. Anybody know about Kalo? You ever hear that acronym? How many of y'all have cell phones, iPhones? Okay, and now what does an iPhone have with it? It has this thing called Siri. Do you know where Siri came from? Came from Kalo. Cognitive Assistant Learns and Organizes. It was a DARPA project between 2003 and 2008. Big project. SRI was involved, millions of dollars, lots of universities, and it had an insane goal. They said, we are going to create the digital secretary. You can fire Janice, and we'll replace it with Robo Janice, and she's going to answer all your messages and your emails and your phone calls, and it's going to be perfect, and we'll put it in the helmets of the soldiers, and it'll drive them nuts because it won't work. And they spent a long time on it. Well, as with most DARPA projects, they reek of nepotism. So the founders of that project immediately went and created a for-profit company called Siri, and Steve Jobs was following it the whole time they were doing it. And he knew as soon as they finish, he's going to buy them. And it's exactly what he did. He bought them. And these guys are kind of edgy guys, so they could work with Steve, but they didn't like Tim. So when Steve died, Tim took over, and then they're like, screw you, Tim, we're going. So they left, and they created another company called Vive, and they were doing that for a while. Then Samsung's like, oh, shit, we need to get into this game. So they bought Vive. So how many people have Bixby? That's Bixby. Yeah, so they double dipped, man. They actually triple dipped. They got some of that government money. They got some of that Apple money. And now they got that Samsung money. So at some point, Microsoft will buy them. And then the gauntlet is complete. The circle is complete. Anyway, so we look at Cardano the same way. We have these broad aspirational goals. We want to get to billions of users. We want to be interoperable with everything. We want to have the perfect governance system. You don't get there. But what you do is you set into momentum a community and a process like what Satoshi did with Bitcoin, where everybody kind of gets the song you're playing. They kind of get the road you're walking, and they keep it going. We will have failed as a project if IOHK is required beyond 2020 for the success of the project. Just like Vitalik will have failed if the Ethereum Foundation and himself are necessary for Ethereum. And at this point, he's really not. He could go and raise yaks with me in Colorado. We're getting some this summer. I'm going to get some camels too. But anyway, you can go raise and shave some yaks with me in the summer, and Ethereum's gone off in the sunset. It'll be fine. And our hope is by the end of 2020, Cardano will be self-sufficient. It'll have a treasury system, be able to make its own decisions. It'll be grown up. And just like a parent proud of its kid, we'll always be there, and occasionally and every now and then might have to lend it some money to pay for college or something, or take care of, get it out of jail after it drinks too much or something like that. But the interventions will become less frequent, and Cardano will get where it needs to go. And my hope is whether IOHK stays beyond 2020 will ultimately be the decision of the community itself. We'll submit a ballot, and we'll have tough competitors. Maybe someone in this room, or someone in America, someone in Africa will say, no, we can do better than what Charles can do. And we're smarter, we're faster, he's old. Let him go and raise his yaks. We'll take it from here. And maybe I lose that fight, and that'd be the happiest moment of my life, because it means that the community grew up and they're better off without me. I have a habit of getting fired from these things, so I'm pretty good at it. And they seem to do very well after I leave. So let's hope for the best.
Okay, back to you guys. And we don't have that much time left, so I was thinking about asking a question to settle who is going to ask the next question. So from the people that want to ask a question, if you could tell me what is the name of the next milestone after Chelly? Yeah. Any of you guys want to ask a question? One second. I need to move the mic through.
Yeah. Well, I just got to ask, why don't you guys have wireless mics? Like, okay. Aren't you like a tech accelerator or something like that?
I know some of us have been here like for years now. So, but for those people coming into the space now that don't have the knowledge that some of us do, in terms of development, would you say Shelly, once it's fully deployed, would that be around Windows 95 in terms of people coming and working on dApps and being able to develop more? And from there, you're going to go into years of just making everything better?
Yeah, when will we have our Windows 95 moment? That's a good question. You know, actually, one of the proudest moments you can have is when somebody shows you your own product and they speak very highly of it and they have no idea who the hell you are. That actually happened to Bill Gates. He was at Narita Airport in Japan. He was flying back from Tokyo to Seattle, and he was just sitting there, unassumedly, being Bill Gates. Nobody knew who the hell he was because it was Japan in 1995. And there was this older Japanese guy, and he was on a laptop, and he was using Windows 95. And Bill looks over at him, and he's like, "Ooh," and he said, "Hey, what you got there?" And the Japanese guy spoke English, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's Windows 95. It's amazing." And he spends like 5 minutes telling Bill Gates how Windows 95 works, right? And Bill's just all giddy as a schoolgirl, and he goes back to Redmond, and everybody's yelling at him and telling him how the sky's falling and everything. He's like, "I don't give a shit about that. I made Toshi happy." But that's a great moment. Are we there yet? Oh, God, no. And we ain't going to be there for 10 years, man, 15 years. What do consumers today expect? They expect one-click install. I mean, for the love of God, you know, Apple and Google, they've just done amazing work on UX and UI. Everything from material design to having standards about where a damn button should be. And you just open up Google Play, you click a button, you have it. It auto-updates. It's relatively secure. That is a beautiful ecosystem, and it's not one we got for free. It's one we spent billions of dollars in 30 fucking years chasing. And what we're doing to consumers today is saying, yeah, well, okay, just go to your command line interface and install this script and do this and do this and do this. It's not there. So can we get to one-click install? Well, we're exploring it with the Daedalus platform. We have a project using GraphQL and Node, and it's built on top of Electron. You know, Ethereum chased that dragon with Mist for a while. You got the Mozilla guys looking at like Wasm and Wazi. In fact, one of the co-creators of Docker said had such a thing existed, they wouldn't have even created Docker. And it's a challenge. So for the next few years, we'll chase and see if we can get a good user experience. To me, what that means is it replicates what you already have come to know and love. You have an app store. You have one-click install. It auto-updates. It's in a sandbox. You don't worry about viruses. Account creation's relatively easy. It's easy to uninstall. You don't have to worry too much about your poker app stealing all your money. These types of things, right? So it turns out that that's super duper hard. It's not like going to Mars hard. Maybe it's like sending a car to the moon hard, you know, but we probably get there at some point. Now, we have an idea. There are other people who have ideas. There's a lot of questions of the best way to do it, and we'll see with Daedalus as it evolves in Goguen and post-Goguen if we can, you know, hit that milestone. And it's unfortunate that Mist seems to be discontinued, and you know, we hope that something comes along with that same vision to keep it going. But you know, there's billions of dollars floating around. A lot of people are chasing this, and it's mostly open source. And it's one of those games of, it's called the smart cow effect. You know where that comes from? You ever raise cows? You always have that one bastard cow that's really smart. And it's watching you, man. It sees you when you shut the gate, and it knows how to open the gate. Now, all the other cows, they're dumber than dirt. They'll drown themselves if they can. But that one cow, he's real smart. He goes and opens up the fence, and he's like, "Freedom!" And all the cows run away. It's a term that actually was used in the security business for DRM. So your digital rights management's only as good as the smartest cow. And the minute that someone figures out how to break it, then everybody's got counterfeit video games. Everybody has the next season of Game of Thrones, right? Everybody can play Red Dead Redemption 2. And so that's the DRM side of things. And it's the same situation with a lot of these things in our space. And we have to contend with that. But with respect to open source software, the minute that somebody cracks the UX UI, I can steal that, put it into my system, and it'll be good for everybody. And then, of course, we'll say we invented it like Apple did.
Do we have time for one or two more questions? One more. Who wants to ask the last question?
It's got to be a good one. Last question. No pressure.
A good one? Okay. Let's try.
All right, Chris.
I don't even need the mic, but I'll take it.
No, you need for the camera. For the camera.
The people are going to watch later.
Charles, real quick question. If you want to invest in ADA right now, you have to go to Coinbase, you have to go to Gemini.
Coinbase. Do you know something I don't know?
You have to go to an exchange, purchase Ethereum or purchase Bitcoin, and then go and get your ADA. Now, I know not in all
there's
places.
U.S. dollar pairings, I think, now.
Yeah, is there plans to get Coinbase or Gemini or a very well-known exchange into the system so you can take fiat and go right to ADA?
I mean, it happens over time organically. It was the same issue with Ethereum. There was a big debate: will Coinbase support Ethereum or not? There was a huge argument about it. A lot of maximalism in that conversation. Eventually, they broke down and it said, "Yes, we like money more than not liking money." So how you answer that question is: at what scale do we need to be in terms of capitalization, transaction volume, and community size, that such a thing makes sense to these types of incumbents? And I think that we're either at that threshold or close to that threshold, and so there's a degree of inevitability to it. We're writing C bindings for our Rust client. We're working on a better HTTP bridge. We're doing all kinds of things to make it a little easier for exchanges to integrate. We rewrote all the APIs for the REST APIs on the system. The V1 APIs are much better than the V0. So at this point, I think it's inevitable that we will get better pairings. We're already getting them, and we'll get more exchange access. Now, as for Coinbase in particular, I can't tell you, and even if I could, I'm under NDA. So I'd have to kill you. So I can't say. Yeah, exactly. So I can't say anything about it. So we'll see what happens when it happens. And I'd love to see before the end of the year some good news, but it's a business and it is what it is.